Thank you very much, Johannes, and good morning to all. I was quite flattered this morning when I got the program for today, and it says that I'll be speaking about the role Trinidad and Tobago can play in the world's energy future. Of course, we're a small island state with 1.3 million people, so that's being quite optimistic. So the real title of the presentation actually now is therefore Partnering Opportunities with Petrotrin. So I intend to give you a little idea as to what we're doing and what opportunities there are for not only partnering, but consulting, joint venturing, and so on with us. And we're having similar experiences that I noticed that other companies are having in their presentations that they did yesterday. And I think we're all on similar strategic tracks. This is a little bit quick snapshot about Petrotrin. We're the state-owned petroleum exploration and production and refining and marketing company in Trinidad and Tobago. It's the last island in the chain of Caribbean islands. Nearest point to Venezuela is only 8 miles, so we're very, very close to the South American mainland. So when we talk about going to America, we could just be going to Venezuela as well. As I said, we have a refinery as well, and we'll get into a little bit of numbers afterwards. We're the largest crude oil producer in the country, producing more than half of the country's crude oil production. And the refinery capacity, as we see there, is around 168,000 barrels per day. It's a refinery with a Nelson complexity of about 9 after we complete a part of an upgrade where we're now introducing an ultra-low sulfur diesel plant. And we expect that to be completed sometime and commissioned sometime this year. As far as our finances is concerned, for this year, 2014, we're at investment grade both on Moody's as well as Standard & Poor's. Although as far as Standard & Poor's goes, we're at the lower level now in terms of investment grade. In terms of our performance, well, in terms of our background, as you see, we have up there our proved reserves and total assets, and our production in 70,000 barrels per day, barrels of oil equivalent from both land and offshore. And of those 70,000 barrels produced, around 47,000 of those are oil. The rest is gas. Now, we're quite accustomed to joint venturing and partnering. As you see, we have 23 joint venture partners on land and onshore. And towards the end, I will show a map which indicates for the island of Trinidad and for the island of Tobago, because we're a Trinidad island state, where all the joint venture partners and the partnership lies. And we do all of these things with a workforce of about 5,500 persons. We occupy actually most of the southern half of the island of Trinidad. Offshore in the Gulf of Paria, we border with Venezuela, and we have joint venture partners on the east coast, and we have deep water, well, we have shallow areas as well as deep water areas as well. So I'd just like to turn now to some of our thoughts for viability, not as an E&P company, as well as an R&M company. We assume, of course, that crude oil prices will remain at their current levels, and we make this assumption for our 5-year forecast. As you know, in terms of quoting reserves with the new method of calculation of reserves, to book reserves, you have to show you have a strategic plan, you have an approved budget before the reserves can be booked, even projected reserves. Refinery margins for our refinery, especially in our part of the world, are under some pressure. This is mainly because of the shale oil and shale gas revolution in North America, and of course having difficulty competing with the US refiners. In fact, around October of last year, in our part of the world, gasoline was selling at prices below crude oil. So, that isn't very helpful for margin. And we even projecting going forward for the next 5 years, margins under pressure, so that we are reacting in terms of running our refinery in optimized fashion rather than trying to maximize throughput. So our throughput is not likely to be 168,000 barrels per day, even though we've just completed a major upgrade to produce more lighter ends and less of the fuel oil. But we have to do some rethinking in terms of reconfiguring some of our plants to go more towards possibly in the petrochemical aspects, so we can rethink our product mix so as to mitigate the impact of the shale oil and shale gas in our area and to optimize our profits. This is especially so because, as you see, 40% of our crude that goes into the refinery is equity crude. So we are importing 60% of our crude on the international markets. And I think this has been a very strong competitive advantage for us. The fact that we're not a merchant refinery, we also have equity crude. Indeed, in the Caribbean, the 2 refineries nearest us have closed. That's in St. Croix as well as in Aruba. And, this is against the backdrop of worldwide, since 2009, we've observed that the data says that there have been 64 refinery closures all over the world since 2009. And this year, when we met with Standard & Poor, and we were changed from investment grade plus to investment grade minus, we also realized that of all the companies around the world who have a refining and marketing business, 65 of them suffered similar or worse fates. So our response is now to increase the proportion of local crude that goes into our refinery, because, as you realize, we do a much better margin, refinery margin, on our local indigenous equity crude rather than imported crude. And we've begun a number of initiatives in terms of drilling, workovers, idle wells, and you'll see some more initiatives in a while. And so far, we are reasonably on track towards increasing our crude production, especially from our marine areas. But to go forth and to go forward into the next 5 years, this is where we're open for business, open for dialogue in terms of collaborating with members in this room and companies that you represent as well. So some of our strategies that are relevant to increasing our crude production, as I said, are listed here, and I would go through them briefly one by one. But as you see here, the first, in terms of growing our upstream business, E&P, and increasing in production reserves by these initiatives. The first one, of course, is to do with seismic. We've acquired seismic on land as well as marine, and I'll show that in a few minutes. A lot of it is 3D seismic. The marine acquisition is due to be completed this week. Then we have plans for more enhanced oil recovery projects. And thirdly, we do have fields in the full gamut of either frontier, developed, greenfield, and so on. And we're looking at reactivation, and I will also go into that in a while. We've also had some recent discoveries, excuse me, in 2012, during the 50th anniversary of Trinidad and Tobago's independence. We also discovered a field which, like our friends in Ghana, as I saw yesterday, we've also called a Jubilee Field. So I guess we have a Jubilee Field 2012 in Trinidad as well as one in Ghana also. And finally, we need to and want and are going to do a study on optimizing all of our assets owned by Petrotrin as well as our joint venture partners. And I will go into that. So turning to the first strategy in terms of pursuing opportunities from 3D seismic. As I had said before, we have done seismic onshore, on land, and our initial target is to engage another rig on land. We only have only one rig for ourselves, and some of our partners each have rigs for drilling. And we'll all be looking in terms of prospectivity and drilling candidates, both shallow and deep acreages, post the seismic. Offshore, again, similar, fast-track processing, and also looking to engage an additional rig or maybe sharing a rig as well by fiscal year 2016. So as a result of those initiatives, the opportunities for joint venturing, the opportunities for working with us, we see here, in terms of farm-ins on some of our exploration plays, as well as we are open to working on a turnkey basis as well for drilling, in terms of doing some of the technical work as well as the operational work, and even in terms of pipelines to tanks, because we have, although we're an oil producing country for the last 100 years, we do have facilities and we do have acreages where there's still a lot of rich opportunity. In addition to which, as I said, for 100 years, we do have some mature fields, and there are opportunities for rejuvenation of those mature fields. In fact, Ecopetrol, who is one of the sponsors of this conference as well, we're working very closely because they've done very well in terms of increasing their production from mature fields, and we're collaborating with them. 80% actually of Ecopetrol's production increase came from joint venturing, and we're also modeling ourselves after the Ecopetrol success. So just a few maps so that we can let you know that we do work in an oil company as well, and we like to draw maps. This is a map of, this is Trinidad here, but this is actually the southern half of the southern 3/4 of the island, and therefore the southern half is from here. And this shows all of the areas which is, as you see on land, quite substantial, where we already have acquired 3D seismic. The important thing about these as well is that these are not absolute green fields, because we have producing fields all around here that have been producing for almost 100 years. So there's a lot of data that is available. And we also have, on the East Coast, we have production here. And as I had said before, this is the border with Venezuela, and we have producing fields in this area also. We're producing right now about 23,000 barrels per day in this area on the marine acreage, and on our land acreages, about 13,000 barrels per day here. And through some of our lease operatorships and farm-out operators, they total about 10,000 barrels per day scattered around. So there's a lot of actual live production data that can be matched and go along with the 3D seismic you already have. So that's where some of the opportunities lie, as we are not going to be able to go to do this on our own. In terms of offshore, again, here's the outline of the southwestern peninsula of Trinidad, and Venezuela is on this side. And we just completed acquisition of 3D seismic in this area, completing this week, but we already have seismic for most of it. And just across the border in Venezuela, there are prolific oil fields here as well. And we have about 17 platforms in this area, as well as another 250 other structures in terms of freestanding wells and so on. So the area is developed, but there's still a lot of potential for further development, especially that we now have acquired or in the throes of completing our 3D seismic. The next strategy we had mentioned was EOR. Now, we've been in EOR on land for some time, but mainly in shallow areas, using, of course, thermal recovery, steam. But our primary recovery for most fields is only around 15%. And I was very delighted to hear yesterday in Romania using horizontal wells as well as EUR, recovery was approaching 60%. So, there's a lot more for us to go. So that's why we say we believe there's still great potential for so doing. And we have reasonably large offshore heavy oil that is relatively untapped as well. Then, slightly north of our operations on the west coast, we have an industrial estate with a number of methanol plants, number of ammonia plants, and so on, producing a fair amount of carbon dioxide. And we have a project with another state enterprise for feasibility of running a pipeline south into our fields for CO2 on the basis that we are considering miscible, maybe CO2 floods within these areas for EOR. So again, all those things represents other opportunities: CO2, EOR for heavy oil, and mature field rejuvenation. And the models that we have been discussing so far, and we actually have some bids, some interest expressed already, is in terms of sharing the incremental production from the mature fields. The next strategy for developing and increasing our production to increase the proportion of local crude into the refinery, of course, is some of the major discoveries that we made recently. As I mentioned, we also have a Jubilee field, very significant, largely green field. But the thing about this is that whereas we thought we only had heavy oil in this area, one of our exploration wells has discovered light oil below the heavy oil, so that there's a lot of potential for commingling in terms of production for multiple completions and so on. So that these are areas which we are completing the technical work right now for development, and we will be likely inviting interest in the development of our own Jubilee field, which exists within the Gulf of Paria also. So as we say here, we're also seeking partners to fast track and develop the implementation of our exploitation plans in some of these new fields. And well, this is just a structural map, and again, the Trinidad would be here in terms of our, this is it here in terms of our southwestern peninsula. Venezuela is way over on the west of this. So the Jubilee field is somewhere in this area, and as you see, there's a lot of structures there, wide spaces here for further work. And finally, the other strategy, of course, is for looking at rationalizing all of our assets. And let me just show the extent to which we have these assets. This again is the island of Trinidad here. This is the island, and this is Tobago. The country is called Trinidad and Tobago. So Venezuela, there is Venezuela. So this distance here is just 8 miles. This Venezuela also comes all the way around here. So this is the Gulf of Paria, and the border is right here. So Trinidad, these are our Petrotrin fields in the Gulf of Paria, but all these other areas, the hatched ones, are joint venture partnerships, and we have 24 of them. So joint venture here is with BG, British Gas, with Centrica, with BG on this side, and with many other partners, local, international as well. So we may be looking at, as we say, coming back, dilution of equity in some of the blocks, outright sales, and even swaps. Especially we've been discussing with some of our South American colleagues in terms of swapping some of their fields with ours, so that we work in their country and they work in ours. These are all possibilities. And any other commercial arrangements which would redound to mutual benefit, as well as sharing the risk and the investment burdens. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's just an overview of the aspects of our strategy for increasing our crude production, as well as, therefore, increasing proportion of local crude that goes into our refinery, so that for the time being, our E&P business would be assisting in promoting the R&M business and helping a better synergy between the two. So far over the last 2 years, since we've resumed drilling, we have stabilized our production. We do have a natural decline also of around 10%, well, between 7 and 10%. So we've now established a platform for growth and development in our E&P business unit. The medium-term outlook in terms of our 5-year forecast does show an overall profitable company with a lot of opportunities in the upstream areas. And we do have a national mandate for increasing our production. I should also mention at this point that, in fact, our Honorable Minister of Energy was supposed to be in this slot. I'm not saying what he was supposed to say, but he did ask me to bring his greetings as well as apologize also for his absence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Khalid Hassanali. May I invite